Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Practical Pet Chat. Lauren, you and I have a interesting conversation that was kind of brought up through a series of things, but I'm going to punt this one over to you to start off.
Oh, you coward.
I'm not a coward. I think this is pretty controversial.
It's
Um,
very
because
controversial.
people, I don't think they see the slippery slope of this. And so, when it comes to how you are finding your pets and bringing them into your family, I just think people get really outside of their normal personalities very quickly.
Yes. Yeah, it's one of those controversial subjects that's up there with politics and what kind of food do you feed your dog and, all those kinds of things. So, it was an interesting thing when you deal with clients who are pet owners. Um, they're impassioned people. Um, And I'm always somewhat bothered by people who wear the badge of how they acquire their pet um, as the most important part of their pet parenting.
Yes.
Because for me, I don't care. And I know that sounds bad, but I'm dealing with the animal that's in front of me right now. How you came about this animal doesn't matter to me. The fact of the matter is you have the animal. People run the gamut of it's better to adopt than shop, and it's better to, do A than B. And it's like, name any acquisition process, and I can tell you things that are good and bad about it. It doesn't really matter. I can tell you things that are problematic with shelter animals. I can tell you things that are problematic with animals you get for free off of lists and social media sites and things like that. Um, Giveaways. I can tell you pros and cons of animals that you buy at a store or that you buy from a breeder. So the acquisition is fraught with problems no matter how you do it, but it can be have a ton of good things no matter how you do it. What that really means is that are you going in with thought and with your eyes wide open? Because I personally am a proponent for freedom of choice. I like you to have the ability to choose to acquire an animal, a domesticated animal of your choice. And the reason I chose the word domesticated is because I'm not a big fan of somebody acquiring a chimp or a lion or, an animal that otherwise really should be living its natural life. But a domesticated animal, um, is that coexists with humans well is different. So, would it be great to adopt? Yes. Always. It's always great to adopt. Does it always fit for everybody? No, it doesn't. Um, People want specific ages. They want specific personalities. They want specific um, uh, types of breeds. Some people want animals that you don't get allergies from. And the proponents for adoption will always say, you can find those. I worked with adoptions. I worked with rescues. I was the board president for a rescue for a year. I understand it very, very well. And I can tell you it is fraught with issues. Because everything that involves humans is fraught with issues. So, it's the same thing. There are quality breeders out there that are amazing. I mean, they do everything the right way. The animal comes first. They don't overbreed. They take animals back. Their guarantee puts the animal first, and on and on and on. And there are bad ones. There are stores that, that that acquire their animals from places that are really good providers of animals, rescues that provide animals to stores, shelters that provide them, quality breeders. And I've heard things, well, quality breeders would never, that's not true. I know of breeders that have been freaked out because they don't want people in their home. They don't want people coming to where they live. They don't want to be sized up for a home invasion or any of that. There's no perfect answer here. What the perfect answer is, you should have the right to choose. And there is oftentimes what people aren't aware of when they rally for specific legislation on taking away acquisition to a particular type of genre, breed, category, whatever, that there is never anything clean in anything legislative. Never. And it opens the door to then removal of this and removal of that. And, let's glom that into the category as well. And next thing you know, you're not going to be able to get this fish, that bird, those dogs or cats because of legislation getting in the middle of it. I
Yeah.
personally don't want to live without animals
Yeah, and I think you hit on something. You hit on a lot of things, and which is why I put it
dangerously.
which is why I put it to you first. And you returned it to the 1 yard line, so I'm going to go ahead and dive over the top and put it in the end zone.
All
Uh,
right.
you that's the unintended consequences are the things quite often that people are most concerned about. And they mistakenly think that if we legislate this, it is going to eliminate these issues. And in fact, quite often it does the opposite and really elevates those issues because of what you said. When you say, well, you can't do this or you can't do that, there are still going to be humans that want that and will be willing to pay for it, do what they need to do to get around those rules. Those rules are stupid. They shouldn't apply to me. I'm blah, blah, blah. So I agree with you. Legislatively, I've had those discussions over the years in the pet world, and I'm sure those who remember those will come back saying, "See, he's never changed." No, you're right. I haven't changed. I always want what Lauren, I think you're conveying is not just the freedom of choice, but I want to do what's right for all of the living beings in that moment, meaning my family and any being that we're bringing into our family. And like you, I would agree. It's funny because I have kids and they'll get upset about a grade they get on a test or this or that, and I'll be like, hey, so here's the good news. I've been around for a while and done a lot of things in the business world. No one's ever asked me what grade I got on this test or that class. I have an MBA. No one says, what was your GPA, where did you rank in the class, any of those things. It's that you did them and you got a good result out of it. And that's what is important to me in this discussion. Getting a great result for the beings involved, meaning the pets and the families that are bringing those pets into their family. At the end of the day, that's to me, and you can't have this argument with some people. I'm hoping most of the audience, all of the audience, hopefully you this grace, is that if the being exists, then it needs that love and care. And I understand your argument that, well, if we didn't have breeders, if we didn't this, if we didn't that, there would still be, ways around that these people would do this. And some of them, as you said, some of the literally best, most focused people I've ever met were certain breeders of certain breeds. And they were the go to expert for not just do you want this type of breed? But they were the expert that the veterinarians would call, that the
Right.
food companies would call, that other pet, parents and those involved in the industry would call, and they would freely give their knowledge because they want what's best for that breed. And I think that's the part that gets lost here is this, like, it's always done out of greed or evil or this or that. And we have such a tendency, especially here in the pet world, in certain areas, whether it's nutrition, whether it's, breeders, buy, adopt versus shop, and all the rest of that stuff. At the end of the day, I just, these beings deserve to be loved. And so I'm not going to think differently about any pet based on a little badge that's on their collar. I'm adopted, I was bought, I was found in the streets. There's just there's it's really important that we have that, because the last point of this is that unintended consequence of trying to legislate your way out of all of these different things, and this is just one element of it. And we will certainly, since we're doing this one, we'll talk about other ones that are controversial as well. But the misguided notion that we can shut down things just with legislation is just ridiculous. And I would hope and think that with all the other chaos going on in the world, we've seen that legislation, unfortunately, is not an end all be all answer. It's really more often than not another point of confusion, contention, chaos, and really separates us all instead of how can we all be bringing ourselves together.
Well,
And
it's muddy, right? It's really muddy. Legislation and everything is really muddy,
it is,
and is there greed? There's greed in adoption.
oh yeah,
I've seen,
good point.
several $100s being charged to adopt out a rescue animal. It's like, what are we doing here? I've
Well,
had
and
instances where people could not viable, great homes, but could not get past the stringent adoption
right,
policies. And it's like, what are you doing? The animal is living in a kennel,
right,
not being loved because you make it impossible for somebody to adopt. So you're feeding the purchase option,
right,
and the problem too is that if people, if adoption works for you, yes, please. But if you know your limitations and you know that you don't have what it takes to take on a kid that may have issues, that you don't, if you don't know how to acclimate an animal into your household with other animals or children, nobody knows any history of the animal. If you're not equipped, that you recognize that. And there's no guarantee that you're not going to have that issue with an animal that you acquire from someone. The
right,
bottom line is that however you get your pet, that you be cognizant, wise, eyes wide open, and that you're aware of the environment. Is it clean? Is it practical? Are they, letting you know everything and see everything? Are they working with you? Do they have the animal's best interest in mind? Which consequently is your best interest, right? So, I mean, like one of the breeders that I went to, she's like, so you don't get papers if you don't spay. And I go, okay, not spaying until my kid is a certain age because of issues that come with spaying too early, which is another reason that people may not want to adopt because animals that are in shelters and in rescues are immediately altered if they're not already when they come in, which can cause growth plate issues and other issues. And, people always counter that. Well, it's better than causing more animals. And well, again, that comes down to the humans, right? To responsible pet parenting. So I get it, but while you're making it so stringent on your rules and everything, how about you do what's in the best interest of the animal and be more stringent on making sure pet parents understand what they're dealing with and the animal that they're getting and that kind of it's just not clean. No
right.
matter which way you
Well,
pick,
and
it's problematic.
yeah, and I want to say this too because I've heard this a lot lately. And you and I we talk quite often, so I know the depth of where this might take us. What I want to call out is this. I have no problem with the rescues asking for a rehoming fee. I actually prefer, and I have said to people on, some of the apps that are out there where they're trying to rehome and they'll just give the animal away for free. Look, we've got too many, evil people out there that
Right,
will take them for free. And if you were just charging a $50 rehoming, they wouldn't, and they wouldn't do
right,
evil things with that animal. And I know nobody wants that to happen. It's just you're trying to do your best. You're like, okay, if it's a money thing, I don't want that to be the barrier between this being that I cannot care for anymore and a loving home. So I don't have a problem with rehoming fee, not only for that, but also because you and I have been involved with the rescues. It is not, to me, the rehoming fee is, there are so many reasons to have a rehoming fee, to be just quite honest, because it's the first moment of thought in your process that this is a commitment. Financially, I am making a commitment, not just here in the moment, but throughout this being's life. And so, yeah, I don't want to see, $1,000 rehoming fees and all that stuff. You're right. That's an extreme. But what I do want to see, and this is the interesting part too, and I've made this point to a number of rescues. I don't have a problem with the rehoming fee. And in fact, what I have often done is on that pet's birthday, I have gone back and, and their birthday becomes their adoption date for me. I have
yeah,
given back, you know, money to that rescue to say thank you. I got another year with, Sugar, with Zoe, with, Belle, on down the line. It doesn't matter to me. So yeah, charging an exorbitant amount, you're also hurting yourself and you're hurting the pet. I agree with you. But understanding too the financial pressures that these organizations go through, there is a balance there. And also, I don't want to see free. Free just brings out the evil folks. And you can say, I'm not evil and I got my pet for free. Bless you. But unfortunately, I can
lucky.
share too many stories
Yeah.
of that wasn't the case. And money should not be, and that's also what drives legislation. I see the money
Hmm.
part of it. And it's funny because that's that just another one of these mistaken, oh, well, we'll eliminate the money part of this by saying breeders who are
No,
only about the money. No, they're not only about the money. Some, sure, but a majority of them, no, they are really trying to do something that elevates that breed more often than not. Because if they don't, they'll be gone. And the backyard breeders and the rest of that, you know, it is just such a misnomer. All the myths that are out there, and you and I talk about doing, myth segments quite often. We should probably add this to that list of that. But from the standpoint of money is not a reason to do this legislation or to get behind this adopter shop, because quite frankly, there should be a cost. It's too easy to become a pet parent. I say that, I say it often. There's no test to become a parent in society, period. Um, but that's why we see the walk away being such an easy, thing. And oh well, that's okay. On the pet side of things, walking away often leads to those awful stories.
right.
I'm going to drop the pet. The Sugar was thrown out of car at the Cabazon outlet in California. And I've said this before, I'm going to let the Lord meet you at the gates, because if I did, it would be something awful. But you know what? I made sure and we paid to rehome Sugar. Best money I ever spent in my life. Soul dog, you know. Um, it just should not be. And at the end of the day, being a pet parent has those responsibilities, has those requirements. So if it has to start with, I've got to do research, I've got to, pay a fee, and I've got to know what I'm getting into, I personally, I'm for it. We've got to elevate it. The amount of times, and I had friends who did this, and they were not evil people, but they got a pet because they had a need that they thought they could fill by getting this pet, and then, oh, well, gosh, my schedule doesn't allow me to care for it, or oh,
COVID.
yeah, I've got to move to it. Oh gosh, yeah, don't even get me started on that. Where now, well, hopefully somebody in my family and friends network can take this pet. Otherwise, I'm just going to turn the pet back into a shelter or this or that. Why rip that pet from another family? So you know what? I may just have a different opinion than a lot of folks, but I agree with you. Freedom of choice is important, and it's important to these breeds as well. Some of these breeds are so unique that the only way you will find one of these breeds is through a breeder network. Um, and I agree with you. I would not want to see those breeds go away. So yeah, that's where I'll put a little.
It's interesting. It's interesting that they do such a better job of it in Europe
Yes,
than we can seem to manage it. I don't know if that's a statement on our particular society. But
yeah.
it's an issue. They manage
The
to,
content of this podcast
dogs
is for
manage to be
informational purposes
intact
only. It is
in
not
other
intended as,
countries
nor should it be construed
without
as, professional medical
anything
advice,
happening
diagnosis, or
that is
treatment for your
unwanted.
pets. Always seek the advice
So
of a
I
qualified
think it's
veterinarian
just
with
a
any questions you
failure
may have regarding your pet's health or
to
medical condition.
to
Never
understand
disregard professional
a
veterinary advice
failure
or delay in
of
seeking it because of something you have heard on this
education
podcast. The hosts and
and
the guests of this podcast are not liable for any
a
actions
little bit of
taken based on
entitlement,
the information shared during these
on the
episodes.
part
Any
of
reliance
we
on the
want what we
information
want
provided
when we
is
want it
solely
the way
at
we
your own
want it.
risk. Copyright
It's a
2025
lot of
Practical Pet
that.
Chat.
It's a
It's
lot
a
of
All
lot of
rights
that.
reserved.
Yeah.
I mean,
Unauthorized
this episode
duplication,
is
distribution, or reproduction of any
gonna
content
clear
from
some
this
folks.
podcast, including
Just
but
be
not limited
real.
Well,
to audio,
It is
scripts, and
thanks. We
show
had a
that is
really
content,
what the
is
nice
podcast
time
prohibited
on our
without prior
podcast
written
with you guys.
consent.
Sorry we
The
won't be
opinions
doing
and
any
views
more of
expressed
them.
by the host and
no,
guests
but
are
I
their
mean
own and do
that
not
is the
necessarily
reality of
reflect the
it.
views of
Is
Practical
that
Pet Chat.
there is a there is a in other words, in this topic you can see all sides of it because there are all sides of it. There's nothing that is so clear. And it's kind of like when we talk about nutrition and other things. There is not one pathway. And when there's not one pathway to the result that we're all clamoring for, then you want to have the ability to find your pathway to do the best that you can by taking your pathway. And unfortunately, sometimes that's going to have some awful results. I wish that wasn't the case. But I do know, and for those, many have reached out and they're surprised to find that I will not jump on board with a, adopt only platform. It's just not it's not the solution that I think they think it is. And so, there are so many more elements to this that I think we also need to be elevating if you're going to try and take that approach. And the irony is, those same people don't want to talk about any of that. They just want to focus on this one little portion of it as if that's, the magic wand moment, and it's not.
But
So,
isn't that sort of what humans do with everything? We glom onto something, and that's what we're going to stay focused on, and that's the only point that we're going to drive home because nothing else matters, and we don't want to listen to reason. The problem is that you and I have had the great good fortune to be exposed to every side of it in depth, and it's an eye-opening revelation to realize there's no perfect answer here. The perfect answer is if you just did what was right by the animal,
yeah.
you
Well,
know.
and I want to call this out too, because that's the real answer here. If you are seeing things being done, whether it's a breeder, whether it's a rescue, whether it's a well-intentioned purpose, how many times do we see people that had 22 dogs or 55 cats in their house? They weren't a breeder or a rescue. They were just an overzealous, I'm
Yeah.
going to make a difference.
I
And
had
that,
12 dogs. What are you saying here?
no, I did not
Come on,
say
Rob.
number 12.
No, but
But listen,
I was,
you could have been your own study though. Okay,
I
so
could have,
maybe
yeah.
that's their defense.
They were my R&D department. But I
Yeah,
mean, I had a number of clients over the years that would say, "Oh my gosh, you should have seen where I got this dog from." And they go into great detail about how horrific it was. And I look at them and they go, "So essentially I saved it." Uh-huh. Did you pay money? And they're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Did you call animal control afterwards to tell
exactly.
them the situation so they could go and check it out?" Well, no. I was thinking about going back and getting another one. You were thinking about going back and getting more money, giving more money to get another one to save it. You're focused on the wrong thing here.
Right.
You know,
Right.
you have the animal now. You own this animal. You're committed to this animal. You're going to do everything you need to by this animal, right? Yes. Stop there. Okay. Focus on this animal. Go home, call up animal control and file a report so
Yeah.
that you can at least have a bad actor examined and become part of a fix instead of part of the worsening of it. Because that's where the issue becomes the issue. You
Yeah.
know, you got what you wanted. Great. Could you
Well,
saved a creature? Great. You think you saved it. You're lying to yourself. But that's okay. You got what you wanted. Please call, follow up, follow through, and make sure that somebody is aware of what you witnessed.
yeah, and the other element of that too, um, is that there are a number of wonderful networks of groups that do amazing things, and we'll talk about that in a future one. So we won't just stay here, folks. We'll get to some positive things, but there's some. I mean, you and I have talked about. There are folks who will help fill the need of, well, I can't find this breed in this area or that area. And there are some of these groups that are going to the areas where those
Right.
breeds are predominant and they're flying them or transporting them, the truckers, the pilots, all the rest of them doing
Yep.
amazing things. So this is, that's why this is one of those where, unfortunately, it is not a one pathway to solve this. The real pathway is what you just said. If you want to see that change, you got to be a part of it by
Right.
when you see it being done wrong. And that means wrong outcomes for the pets, the people that adopt them. That's when you've got to act. That's when you can be the change that you're clamoring for and that the pets deserve. So I'll give you the last word, but that's
I was just going to
topic.
say the state dog, the state of California dog is the Chihuahua. And look how many of those they fly out and relocate to other areas for people who can't find a Chihuahua.
Right? No,
You
it's a good
know,
call.
it's like, come on, there's so many better avenues to fix this or to help get it somewhat on track
Yeah.
than the staunch chest beating,
Well, and
this is
let's
the only
be,
way.
and because why not? Let's just add more fuel to the fire here. But I see this every time when we have a natural disaster, we have things going on big.
Oh,
It is the private groups that go in and are saving. It is
yeah,
individuals, this over reliance on the government to do things right is not something I'm ever going to advocate for. They got enough to do that they've got to do better at, let alone get involved deeply in the pet world. It's just, and the problem becomes you're giving away your power, your ability to make a difference. Don't do that. So on that, feel free to send your emails on this episode to
to Rob.
no to Lorin, definitely practicalpetchat@gmail.com. We appreciate you. And regardless of how you got the pets that you love
Love
in
them.
life, love them. Thank you for loving them. Thank you for doing all that you're doing. That's why we do what we do on this podcast and talk about the things fun and sometimes maybe not so fun. Thank you. Really appreciate you. Spread the word. Practical Pet Chat. A lot of different social media networks. Can't wait to see you next week.
Bye, guys.